Thank you for joining us today. Today, it's my privilege to spend a little bit of time talking to Kevin Gramlich, the newer CEO at ConnectLife, the OPO serving the Buffalo area. And Kevin, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Steve.
I know you've been there in the CEO role about 9 months, a little over 9 months, but you've obviously been with ConnectLife for 25 plus years. So you got a lot of new colleagues. Do you want to talk about your sort of how you got involved in ConnectLife and donation and then got to where you are today?
Sure. So back in 1995, I was actually working in the local medical ICU of the transplant center, which was the post-heart and lung transplant program.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, being a young nurse and early in my career in RN, I didn't really think a lot about where the organs came from because my job was to make sure that the recipient was prepped and ready for OR in a pretty timely fashion because the organs could show up at any point. So then after having conversation with a couple of the transplant surgeons, they felt I might be better suited to speak to donor families and try to get them to, authorize and consent to organ donation. So I gave it a try. I was one of 11 employees at ConnectLife when it started. We used to be upstate New York transplant services. I worked in a coordinator's role probably for the first 4 or 5 years. And we brought in a gentleman, I'm going to say his name, Ed Krause from the University of Wisconsin. And it really changed the way we did organ donation in Buffalo. It was early on in the stages of donation program. And we used to pick up the phone and we'd call transplant centers. There was no electronic offers, any of that stuff. So Ed had taught us that just call up and say, hey, I have a heart available. Even if we don't have an echo, even if we don't have any labs yet, well, you have to start to reach out to these transplant programs and build trust. Mm-hmm. So that really changed. We went from, we're the smallest OPO of all 57 OPOs. We're the smallest population, smallest geographical area. We do anywhere through the years from 40 to 60 donors a year, anywhere from 130 to 160 transplanted organs a year. So it was a really big change from how we did placement of organs and, bringing on staff through the years, working with donor families, working with the transplant centers. The collaborative was the second part. The federal collaborative was probably the second point in my career, which helped me really see how partnerships and, working together and best practices and sharing best practices amongst OPOs and transplant centers. But it was the first time that we brought the hospitals along with us. Okay. And we had 5 or 6 of our larger donor hospitals actually at the meetings, at the collaborative meetings. So it was really great to see everybody working together. I really got inspired and ended up, taking on more of a leadership role, having meetings with CEOs and medical directors, and the buy-in was tremendous early on in my career. So that's kind of how I started out in a leadership role. I was hook, line, and sinker at the bedside because I already worked with the recipients and just saw the wonderful outcomes, the life-changing transplants that they had. So as far as how I ended up as coming into the CEO role, is COVID really changed our organization pretty swiftly. We're an organ, tissue, and eye center, but we're also a blood bank. So through COVID, with all the changes that kind of came about, we had, staff that was, we had some layoffs, we had some change in leadership. So right after the beginning of COVID, they kind of moved me into a COO role. And then I was in that for about 6 months. And then, Mark Simon said, hey, how about if you move into the CEO role? And Mark Simon is still here as president, but he's been, kind of grooming me and, orienting me to the CEO role. So it's kind of how we ended up where we are today.
Which is great. It's a great story. I mean, you've learned it from both sides, the transplant side and the donation side. So I'm sure that's helpful as you build those relationships with your donor hospitals and your transplant centers. How would you describe, now that you've gone through this evolution, how would you describe your leadership style, and how do you foster a positive and inclusive culture among your staff?
So I think we have a great team. You know, in this field, there sometimes is a lot of turnover. Then sometimes you have staff for 4, 5, 6 years that you work well with. Right now, we're kind of in a transition phase, but I think our group has embraced the idea that we're only as strong as our weakest leader. So we all kind of rally around, even though like when we have operational meetings, even though somebody is maybe the director of blood services, they have a lot of input in how we're tracking and looking and monitoring data and trends in organ services or tissue and eye services.
Mhm.
So it's kind of the next man up mentality, but also allowing them to be creative in their own styles, but never kind of, squashing ideas. Just keep, throwing it at the wall. Yellow sticky notes. We do a lot of those exercises, but every voice is heard. And some days it's your idea that sticks. Other days, it's not going to be your idea, but don't stop bringing them.
Mhm.
So we work very hard to keep encouraging our staff, through open dialogue, open communication. Um, yeah, very good staff we have here right now.
That's great. That's great collaboration. It's great to hear. Are there specific initiatives or innovations that you and your team are envisioning implementing during this, as you're making this transition into the CEO role and now?
Yeah, one of the things that we struggled with the most, I think, here in Western New York is we lost a big part of our volunteer group due to COVID. We lost a lot of community engagement, a lot of hospital engagement. There's a high turnover in hospital staff. There have been several strikes in the past 2 years where we have a lot of travelers coming in and out of the area that really just don't have the sense of community and sense of tie to organ donation. And sometimes we get lucky. Maybe they did a couple donors in Pittsburgh. Now they're here in Buffalo. So, we certainly appreciate that. So what we're kind of doing is getting back to basics, you know, trying to think about ways we can get donor families volunteering back again, getting recipients in front of our staff to remind them all the good work that they do. Sometimes if you don't see the results of your work, you can kind of get, maybe a little jaded if you have a family that's tough or the hospital staff is tough overnight that night. So we're trying to get back into community engagement and donor and volunteer group engagement.
No, that's great because as you said, I mean, COVID's been tough on
Yeah.
everybody, and it's decimated a lot of things, and it's been tough on frontline healthcare workers especially. So
Yeah.
reminding them what a great job they're doing every day and the difference they're making, I think is key.
Yeah,
That's
I know that really carried me in the early days, being up 24, 36 hours. All you had to do was meet one recipient and you were ready to go for the next 12 months.
yeah, that's great. How do you, we're all trying to look longer term for our vision, but how do you balance that with your short-term goals to take those steps and work with your team to achieve that longer term vision for ConnectLife?
So one of the things we've always talked about is it's every donor every time, every recipient every time, every organ every time. So that philosophy really hasn't changed. The only philosophy that we've really started to focus on or operationally try to change is the need to get to the CMS regulations to keep us going. So this year is probably one of our better years we've had in the past four. When they first sent out the data for 2017, we were tier one, then we were tier one, tier two. From 18 or 19 on, we've been tier three. So we really struggled, like I said earlier, a lot of turnover, a lot of changes in hospital staff. But I feel like we have a really good core here. We're on pace to do 65 donors, which would be the most we've ever done in a single year. Our stretch goal in 3 years was to do 80. So I feel like we're kind of on our way, at least halfway through this year. Our goal was to do 168 organs transplanted this year. We're on pace to do 207 based on the first 6 months worth of data. So we are seeing great improvements. An area that we still need a lot of work to do is our authorization rate. But that, again, that's how does the hospital set the table for that? How much time are we spending with the families? Is it just a question or is it an interaction with the families? Those are some of the things we have to take in consideration. But as far as long-term goals, I think they're there, but our focus right now is day to day.
That's great. And that's great to hear what you're on pace for. I mean, I'm fingers crossed you get there.
Yes.
But I understand the tragedy that's involved to get there, but it's great that you guys have set those stretch goals and you're working with your team to push for it.
Yeah.
So good luck with that.
Yeah. And one of the other challenges that we have is we're a very high DCD
Okay.
donation rate. We have 48% of our donors are DCD. So we really rely on a lot of the upcoming, the new technologies with biomedics and transmedics and all the stuff they're doing with DCD hearts and lungs that has really changed and really helped us improve our number of organs transplanted.
No, that's 48% is really high. So it's interesting that you guys are up there with it. So
Yeah.
And I'm sure as technology changes, as there's wider adoption, it's going to help you guys. I mean, as you move forward.
Yeah, they're these services are very willing to help you manage the donor, to optimize the organs from the gift and doing a really good job to get here and recover for us at transplant. So
good luck. Shifting a little, so we've talked a lot about your ConnectLife you. So what do you do at the end of the day to relax? What do you do to unwind after a long day at work?
Well, I would have to tell you first off, my wife and I, we walk our dog every day. If I don't, I get in trouble. If I'm not home by 7 or 8 every night. Just generally relax. I have 3 children. They're all grown. They've all graduated from college. We have a wife for our first child is getting married next September. But for the most part, very family oriented. Not a lot going on. I do like golfing, but as I'm getting older, my body doesn't like golfing quite as much. So
yeah,
but yeah, definitely walks and just kind of de-stress throughout the day.
That's great. We have 2 dogs, so I feel you're the pain of you needing to make sure they're walked during the
Yeah,
day.
my daughter has 3 dogs, 2 Great Danes or a Great Dane and a Black Lab, and I can't remember the name of the type of the last one, but she also fosters a lot of dogs. So at any given time, she could have up to 3 to 5 dogs rolling around the house. So
That's great.
yeah.
Anything else you want to share with your OPO colleagues before we close up?
Sure. First of all, I would like to share that I really appreciate all the help through the years. It's always been very collaborative. Everybody's always been willing to help. You send an email, you pick up the phone, you make a phone call. If they can't help you, they get you in touch with somebody who can help. We're very excited to start the Impact program. I think September 9th is our first call. Very excited about that. We're working with, I can't remember, I think her name is Julie Moss.
Yeah.
Through CMS to try to help improve there. So it's just a lot of other outlets to help us get better. And I really appreciate all of our colleagues in this field, always through the years have helped. But even right now, just to try to pull all of us who are trying to get to tier 2 and tier 3, trying to get us up there.
Yeah. Now, and we're excited that you're going through the Impact program. So looking forward to our team working with you. And yeah, Julie's been great with the QI program.
Yeah,
so,
the quality initiative.
Yeah, we're collaborating with them as well because we want to provide OPOs with as much help as they can. We want everybody in tier 1, if not tier 2. So
yeah.
So
if we could solve our authorization rate, if anybody watches this and wants to give me a shout, that would be greatly appreciated.
All right. Well, Kevin, thank you for joining us. Thank you for spending some time with us. I really appreciate this.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me, Steve. Have a good day.
You too.